So what makes up a business continuity plan? Well, an important part, of course, of this is clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Everything from the people that are going to oversee business continuity in the Emergency Operations Center, down to the leaders of the various teams that are working on restoring specific systems or specific functions. For every role, we should also have a deputy that could step in where necessary. One of the things that's important is also to have coordination and communication. This includes the conditions and the authority to actually invoke the plan. There can sometimes be questions. Should we execute the plan or not? Can we wait a little bit longer? Is this just an incident, or do we need to go to an alternate process? So we need to determine what are the conditions under which that decision should be made. And in the end, who has that legal authority to actually activate the business continuity plan and begin recovery to an alternate site. One of the reasons this is important is that if we're a publicly traded organization on the stock exchange, the declaration of a disaster is the type of event that can affect share price. So therefore we have to be very careful to have announced that in a very professional manner. That all of our shareholders had the opportunity to learn about the disaster at relatively the same time. An important part of the plan is how to reach key people. Key people, both of employees, but also maybe key people in the media, key people in various government agencies, key people in law enforcement, key vendors that are going to provide support. So have contact information and validate that contact information on a regular basis. We should also have in the plan that list of resources that would be required for continued operations. That list of resources would include what do we need in facilities or buildings, what do we need in people, what do we need in data, what do we need in equipment, and what do we need in supply chain. All of that information was gathered during the BIA. Now it's incorporated into the actual actionable plan. We list those resources and we look at what are the options for those. For example, today with facilities, can people work from home, or do we need to provide office space for them? When it comes to data, how can we provide access to that data? Are there more than one way that that access could be granted or a person could reach the data they need? We call it a business continuity plan, but in reality, it might be 100 different plans. Different plans for different scenarios. A plan for a fire is very different from a plan for a virus. So some of the types of plans we can have, obviously, the first and one of the most important plans is our incident response plan. If something happens, the incident response plan is how do we respond to that incident in an effective manner. In most cases, we will be able to address the incident without ever moving on to a business continuity planning situation. The next thing is life safety. It's very important, of course, that our first priority in any incident is to ensure the health and safety of our personnel, our employees, any contractors, or any customers that are on site. So we should have occupant emergency plans. The ones that, for example, quite often are used in fire drills or other cases where there's a bomb threat, so people know how to get out of that building in a safe, orderly manner. We write the business continuity plan, the plan to keep the critical business functions running, even in a disaster. And we'll also write a disaster recovery plan. A disaster recovery plan is the plan that looks at then the recovery of IT services to make sure that the supporting services that are necessary for our business to operate, we have a plan for then recovery of those services. Many organizations will also write a co-op, a continuity of operations plan. And the idea of this is how can we continue some of our critical services even though things like IT and other supporting services are not even available. is there a way we can continue at least some level of operations? As we said, possibly even with a manual process. Or maybe we outsource to another company. We should also have plans to deal with communications. One of the things that can easily compound the impact of a disaster is when the organization has been slow or not quite truthful in how they've communicated. Everybody can see that the building's on fire. It's no use trying to pretend it's just a barbecue. And yet this is where crisis communications become so important. Do we have trained people that are able now to go out and communicate effectively with the media so that the right message about our organization is being then shared? We often say today, we have to share our information at the same speed as social media. We also need to look at what are the supporting services necessary for our business to run. We can look at things such as, well, maybe having spare equipment. If a piece of equipment fails, then we can get a spare off the shelf, plug it in, configure it, and have it up and running. In some cases, we might even have failover. We'll have such that if a piece of the equipment fails, there's another one sitting beside it that's already warm, ready to go, and the processing will just switch over to that alternate equipment with a near seamless loss of service. Make sure we have backups of our information. If we don't have a backup, and if the backup is no good, then it's quite possible we won't have the ability to recover. As auditors, we should also check for insurance. Make sure that we have appropriate insurance to cover some of our loss, to help us as an organization to minimize the financial impact. In some cases, of course, when we've had a disaster, there's going to be a number of extraordinary costs and buying new equipment and dealing with the actual extent of the disaster. We want to make sure we have the depth within the organization to be able to withstand that impact. Also, one thing that gets missed in many plans is a transportation and logistics plan. This is, how do we move people? How do we move data to where they're needed? If I've had to relocate my operations, do I have a way to get my staff to that location? Can I divert my telecommunication services, for example? This is where one of the things that often gets dropped in a plan are these practical logistical items. Make sure we have contact information for all of our key personnel. So with all of this, we're prepared. Now, hopefully we never need to use the plan, but at least we put in place the preparation so that if a disaster did strike, we'll be able to ensure the recovery and continuity of our business operations.